I know that what has been done is wrong from all that I have been taught, and that any reasons that I'm going to give will not make it right. Understand why I felt that I had to do this. After it was all over, I said some prayers. That was the least I could do. Welcome to Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. So, quick catch up on last week. Francine's story from the last episode. Wow! You shock and amaze me with the responses that come from the stories that I tell. The honesty, the outrage at the story, the outrage at her mother and at her life was strong. It was strong in the game. It was. So thank you if you got in touch. Very quickly, let's do some shout outs and then we'll get on with this story. Shout out to Molly Prophet. Hello Molly, thanks for getting in touch. Hope you're well. Tiffany Dixon, thanks Tiffany for your support. Alison Wren. Alison is writing a little piece on Extraordinary Stories Podcast, and that is so flattering for me. Thank you, Alison. David Crofton. Cheers, mate. I appreciate the support. And lastly, Sam Pett. Sam has a brilliant podcast called The Kimchi Chronicles, where she sits down with a guest and she interviews them about a subject around that guest or something that they might have in common, or just something that's really interesting that she wants to talk about. Not only is she a brilliant person to talk to, the podcast is just really interesting because it's constantly moving. The subject matters change from week to week, and I had the absolute pleasure of being a guest on the last episode. The episode's called An Extraordinary Guest, so that's the Kimchi Chronicles. So go give it a listen, because you'll go back through, listen to Sam's back catalogue, and listen to her talk to some really interesting people, and the style of it is just lovely. So cheers, Sam. Okay, this story, the chances are you will know the story in this episode, but it's one that I find I just can't not tell this one. So see, when I started the podcast, I always thought, right, there are certain stories I'll never tell. There's some that I just won't ever do. So O.J. Simpson, boring as fuck, done to death, who cares? Move on. Karla Homolka, great story, but everyone's done it, done to death. Casey Anthony, it's another one. It's so overdone. Now, partly with that one, my blood boils so much with the Casey Anthony story that I can't really bring myself to do it. And this story it wasn't on the no, I'll never tell that list, but it was on the, I'm not sure, because some podcasts have covered this one. But, here's the thing. this story still fascinates me. And there's something about it, there's something in the psychology of it that absolutely fascinates me. And somehow, even though it's horrific, it kind of lives somewhere in my mind. So, I'm going to tell it for this short stories episode. Are you ready? Okay, let's go. Dear Pastor Renwinkle, I'm sorry to add this burden to your work. I know that what has been done is wrong from all that I've been taught, and that any reasons that I might give will not make it right. But you're the one person that I know that, while not condoning this, will at least possibly understand why I felt I had to do this. The List family lived in New Jersey, USA, and they consisted of Father John, Mother Helen, and their 3 kids. The 3 kids that they had were 2 sons, Frederick and John Jr., and their daughter, Patricia. Now, they lived in a big fancy pants house. You know, it's the kind of house, I pass all the time and I go, oh man, I want to live in a house like that. One day I will. The podcasting game, that'll get me there. Of course it won't. I'm kidding. So, John List, the father in this situation, he had in his time been a Sunday school teacher. He spent time in the army, and once out of the army he became a very well educated man. He did, first of all, a degree in business and then a master's in accounting. And what John was really good at was management. He was very clear in decision making, and he really quickly moved up into senior positions with big accountancy firms. And I mean, once you're up there, you're earning good money. So, John List, not a dafty. Not a silly man, not a stupid man by any means. So, along the way in his life, he meets a girl named Helen. They fall in love and they marry in 1951. So, Helen was quite an outgoing type, a party girl. She loved having a social life. But as is often the way, what comes with having a hectic social life is a lot of drinking, and Helen liked to drink. She drank quite heavily, and John would often have to be the steady hand in their life. However, despite loving a drink and a party, and who doesn't, they have 3 kids in 14 years. John continues to work his balls off to make money for the family, and he gets a vice president position within a major accountancy firm. So a great job. But the downside is that in his home, Helen's drinking is getting worse and worse. And now the kids are growing up towards sort of teenage age. John moves his family to a new house in New Jersey. And this is a huge, massive, expansive house with 19 rooms. So it's got lots of bedrooms. It's got a ballroom. Yes! I need a ballroom in my house. I mean, not for hosting a ball, but just so I can go in and put some tunes on, dance like a crazy man, sing my heart out. So this 19 room mansion is where he moves them to. He also moves in his elderly and quite infirm mother, Alma, and she lives on the upper floor of the house. I bet old Alma loved that ballroom when she could get down to it. Alma was like well in her 80s, but you know, maybe sometimes she tried to get down to that ballroom, have a wee boogie. It was called Breezy Knoll, the house. Ah, a lovely name. Breezy Knoll. Sounds like the kind of home where life was free and easy and people were happy. Dear Pastor Renwinkle, I'm sure many will say, how could anyone do such a horrible thing? My only answer is it isn't easy, and it was done after much thought. So, was life easy for John? No. Was it easy for the family? No. John List wasn't the easiest of men. He was uptight. He was continually stressed. Him and his wife Helen, they didn't have a good marriage. And not really just because of her drinking, actually because he himself was just a very uptight person, and so together they didn't make a great match. John was also really, really hard on his kids. He expected a certain level of discipline in the house. And now, you know, his kids are sort of all heading towards teenage years. Some of them are, you know, into like 14, 15. At that point, if you've been a strict disciplinarian all the time, if you're this wound up and uptight all the time, you're going to find teenage behaviour challenging. You're going to find that difficult to deal with. But here they are, they're living in this wonderful, huge house. And the truth is actually that Helen's drinking, it was spiralling out of control. And the kids were a real challenge to him. I mean, nothing really crazy with the kids. Maybe just like, you know, trying a little bit of weed here, a bit of alcohol, just, you know, trying to figure some stuff out as teenagers will do. But the house is a big financial burden. Helen had come to love the idea of owning this huge house and the high society and the status that it brought. John, not so much, because he was paying for it and he was struggling. And he was really struggling. John had lost his job. He was no longer working as a vice president for the major firm that he'd been employed by. And so, what did John do? Did he tell his family? No. John went through this entire rigmarole of pretending to his family that he was still working. He would get up each day, put on his suit, get his stuff together, and go off to work. I mean, that must be exhausting. To get up every day, put on your suit, get your stuff together, go downstairs and be like, okay everyone, goodbye, that's me, I'm off to work for the day. Cheerio everyone, bye bye. No, hang on. He's not from Mary Poppins. Why would he do it like that? He wouldn't do it like that. That was really stupid. But he would just be like, bye, I'm off to work and whatever, and everyone would be like, oh, we'll see you later. But no, he wasn't going to work. So what happens in the what happens in the time when he's not going to work? Well, he's building up more and more and more stress inside of him. And he just keeps thinking, they're going to find out. The bills won't be paid. I can't afford the house we're living in. I can't afford this living. Now, does he go to his family, his wife, and explain any of this? No, he doesn't. He keeps it all to himself. He keeps the stress of the money, the pretense of a job, up for months, and with each day, the stress is building. This isn't a great situation for John, but it's no excuse for what happens next. Dear Pastor Renwinkle, I know that what has been done is wrong. From all that I've been taught, and that any reasons I give will not make it all right. John owns a 9mm semi-automatic gun, and on November 9th, 1971, he decides to use it. So on this day, he wakes up early and he gets ready for the day ahead, the day that he has planned. So the kids, they head off to school. He goes, sees that his mother is okay, and he takes her breakfast. He gets ready for work, he gets all dressed up in his suit, and he heads down to the kitchen. And in the kitchen is his wife Helen, and she's just finished her breakfast. As she heads towards the fridge to put the butter back, John List takes the gun from inside his suit jacket and he places it to the back of his wife's head. He shoots her dead with one shot. This was 9:25 a.m. From here, what he does is he leaves her dead body on the kitchen floor, and he takes the stairs up to the 3rd floor where his mother is. His mother, aged 84, is lying in bed, and when John enters the room, he goes over to where she's lying in bed. He raises the gun again, and he places it just above her left eye, and he shoots her dead in bed. It's now 10 a.m. and John List has killed his wife and his mother, and the day is just beginning. John List sits in the house with the 2 dead bodies, and he begins to write a letter. Dear Pastor Renwinkle, understand why I felt I had to do this. I wasn't earning anywhere near enough to support us. Everything I have tried falls to pieces. True, we could have gone bankrupt, and maybe we could have gone on welfare. But to John List, the idea of going on welfare was the worst idea in the world. So when school is finished and he knows that 2 of the kids will be coming home, he waits. He stands behind the front door of the home and he waits for their return. So Patricia, 16, she comes home first. She opens the door to her house. She walks through into the hallway, and her father shoots her in the head from behind, and her body falls down dead in the hall. This is 2:45 p.m. At 3:15, half an hour later, the 13-year-old Frederick arrives home, and like his sister had just done, he comes through the front door. His father is waiting And once more, John List raises that gun and he shoots the 13-year-old Frederick in the back of the head, and Frederick's body falls down, dead, next to his sister in the hall. So we're now at 3:30 in the afternoon, and John List has murdered 4 members of his family. But he decides he's hungry. Yes, hungry. I mean, come on. Are you kidding me? Oh, I mean, there's a lot in life that we've all not done. And hopefully, everyone listening, I hope that includes we've not all done a murder. But I just can't imagine that if I was having this day, I would be hungry within it. But, well, I guess you just don't know. I guess you just do not know. So to deal with his hunger, he makes lunch in the house. Where does he make it? Oh, that's right. In the kitchen. In the kitchen where his wife's dead body is lying. He makes lunch. He sits there. He eats it. And he leaves the house. He leaves the house and he leaves the 4 bodies behind. Where he's going to is the school to watch his only remaining child, John Jr., play a game after school. He's playing a game of soccer or football, if you're British. Once the game is finished, he drives the 15-year-old, John Jr., home. And once inside the house, he pulls out the gun. And this time it's not to the back of the head. He shoots his 15-year-old son in the face, straight on, and in the chest. So that's now it. John List has just killed his entire family, and now all 5 dead bodies lie in that house. So what does he do next? Well, it's the return of the ballroom. He gets some sleeping bags, he puts them under the bodies, and he drags them into the ballroom, where he then lines them up in a row. All except his mother. She is still upstairs. But in that ballroom, we have the bodies of Helen, Frederick, Patricia, and John Jr., all laying side by side. Dear Pastor Remwinkle, after it was all over, I said some prayers for them from the hymn book. That was the least I could do. Now his next actions are crazy. Well, actually, they're maybe not crazy. They sound a bit crazy. There is a bit of logic, but they just seem within this story they're just such odd details. He goes round the house and he cuts himself out of all the family pictures. So I just think that's so odd that he's picks up a picture of the 5 of them and he's cuts his own head out of it. Do you know what I mean? One by one, he just chops his own head out of these pictures. It's weird. Then he goes round and he puts on every light in the house. Every light possible, he flicks it on. Then he puts on Christian radio really, really loudly. So in a bizarre way, I can kind of see what John List's logic was at this point, because he's thinking, well, if I can take my face out of all these pictures, it'll be harder to find me. Although you're going to be like, well, yeah, but people know you're their dads. People know that's her husband. Anyway, that was obviously his logic. The lights on, yeah, that's like the old trick that people think will stop a burglar. Oh, we'll put the lights on, a burglar definitely won't come anywhere near the house. And the Christian radio, Don't know if the Christian radio was just about making noise, or the Christian radio was maybe coming from I'll play some Christian music for their dead bodies. I don't know. Now, if all of that added up, if all of that was John List's attempt at covering his tracks, well, it bloody well worked. John List flees that house, never to return. Because John List actually did manage to cover his tracks. And it's the next part of this story which makes it even more insane. It would take a month for the bodies in that house to be found. And how they were found is that neighbours had noticed that, whoa, the List house is like really, really bright. Really, really bright. But then over the course of a month, what was happening was lights were just disappearing one by one because the light bulbs were burning so much, they were just going out. So gradually, the house was just falling in to darkness all the time. And neighbours were starting to call police and say, we haven't seen any of the List family either go in or come out of that house for a while. And there was really bright light, and now they're all disappearing. Could police come and maybe just give it a little check? Maybe just see what's going on? Police do, and they horrifically have to go into that ballroom and find the 4 bodies lined up. They also track down, who else did John List know? Who else would he have contacted in this situation? And Pastor Renwinkle comes up as one of those people. And so now what they have is a confession letter that says, Dear Pastor Renwinkle, you are the one person that I know that, while not condoning this, will at least possibly understand why I felt I had to do this. We might have pulled through this, but this was just too much. At least I am certain they have all gone to heaven now. If things had gone on, who knows if that would have been the case. I'm sorry, mate, fuck off. I know they've all gone to heaven now. Fuck you just murdered your entire family. Shut up. So a manhunt for John List begins. But he's been gone for a month. Who knows where? Well, I'll tell you where. Virginia. He'd gone to Virginia and he'd set himself up a new life. He'd given himself a new name. And that new name was Bob Clark. I mean, it's not very inventive, is it? Bob Clark. I mean, I feel like if I was to be giving myself a new name, I'd be like, it's Francesco Wolf. Or, why would it be Francesco Wolf? Or I could wheel out Sebastian Sex Sugar. He could be my new alias. Just something slightly more interesting than Bob Clark. It's a bit rubbish. Anyway. Or I suppose, no, I take that back, actually. Do I? Do I take it back? Nah, I'm not taking it back, but I'm also, I'm guessing that you just want a name that's going to blend in and not necessarily cause any alarm. So John List, he's in Virginia. This is where he's run to. Now he gets there, sets up his new life as Bob Clark, and he meets one Dolores Miller. They start dating, and before you know it, he marries Dolores. During his time in Virginia, he works as an accountant, and he just carries on with his life for, get this, 18 years. Yes, 18. 18 years. That's how long the John List murders went unsolved for. But how in the end does John List have justice served? Well, in Virginia, he is in the part that he's in. It's a small sort of suburb. He's quite a part of the community. He's pretty well known. Everyone's like, oh, hey, there's the old big Bob Clark over there. You know Bob, everyone knows Bob. That's going to happen. If you live in a place for 18 years, that's going to happen. What happens one night is that the TV show America's Most Wanted decides to do an episode on unsolved cases. And one of the cases they choose to feature is the List family murders. Well, some people in that same town that he lives in are watching this TV show, and they see an image on the screen of John List, and they think, oh fuck, that looks like Bob Clark. Now everyone in America knew about the List family murders. It was such a big story. But imagine you'd known someone for 18 years who was just this person you knew in your life, and you suddenly saw them on TV. You'd be like, what the actual hell? What am I looking at here? Strange feeling. So that night there's a couple of calls made to police to say, this is going to sound really strange, but there's a man living in my town who looks awfully like John List. Police check it out, and within days they can prove that the man who's been posing as Bob Clark is in fact John List, who had killed his family 18 years before. Now he tries to protest, of course he does, but it's useless. It's a waste of time. The case goes to court, where he is on trial for 5 counts of first-degree murder. And he says this in court: I feel that because of my mental state at the time, I was unaccountable for what happened. I ask all affected by this for their forgiveness, understanding, and their prayers. The jury, the judge, they just will not have a second's worth of sympathy for John List. And he's sentenced to 5 consecutive life sentences. And I think what the judge says here is so beautiful, and it's the best way to end this story. The judge says, John List is without remorse and without honour. After 18 years, 5 months and 22 days, it is now time for the voices of Helen, Alma, Patricia, Frederick, and John Jr. List to rise from the grave. And so ends the story. Yes, John List, It's quite the story. John List died age 82 in a prison, still in prison. He died from pneumonia. You can see, if you really wanted to, and some of you might have seen all these before, you can go on and like YouTube and whatever, and you'll find interviews that he gave later on in life. is just creepy as fuck. He's just, oh, you know, sounds terrible, but watching some of these interviews with him when he's in like his later years, I'm looking at him and thinking, you really creep me out now. And I'm thinking, I cannot imagine how creepy and scary you must have been when you were younger, back in the day. Because he's not like, he's not intense necessarily in the interviews that he gives later. And he doesn't really actually say a great deal. He doesn't sit there and go, well, I did this on this day and I did this on this day and whatever. You know, he's a little bit reserved and whatever. It's still the creepy vibe. But I think I just would have hate to have known you when you were at the point when you did this. Because I think you would have been terrifying. I think you would have actually been proper scary. So I referenced that letter. And that letter played a really big part. For me, it plays a really big part because I think it kind of gives a lot of the... it helps explain a lot of the narrative. So, I'm going to give you, just to end this episode, I'm going to give you the highlights of that letter. And this is, I think, the thing for me that just jumps out the most about it is, yes, the content, but also that this was written on the day that he murdered his entire family. Dear Pastor Remwinkle, I am sorry to add this additional burden to your work. I know that what has been done is wrong, from all that I've been taught, and that any reasons that I might give will not make it right. But you are the one person I know that, while not condoning it, will at least possibly understand why I felt I had to do this. I wasn't earning anywhere near enough to support us. Everything I tried seemed to fall to pieces. True, we could have gone bankrupt and maybe gone on welfare. But knowing the type of location that would have had us live in, plus the environment for the children and the effect on them, was more than I thought they could endure. With Helen not going to church, I knew that this would harm the children. I continued to hope that Helen would go to church. And that is the sum of it. At least I'm certain that they've all gone to heaven now. If things had gone on, who knows if this would have been the case. Of course, my mother got involved because doing what I did to my family would have been a tremendous shock to her at this age. After it was all over, I said some prayers for them all from the hymn book. That was the least I could do. Originally, I had planned to do this on November 1st, All Saints' Day, but the arrangements were delayed. I thought this would be an appropriate day for them to get to heaven. As for me, let me be dropped from the congregation rolls. I leave myself in the hands of God's justice and mercy. Please remember me in your prayers. I will need them whether or not the government does its duty as it sees. I am only concerned with making my peace with God. P.S. Mother is in the hallway in the attic, 3rd floor. She was too heavy to move. John. Well, well, that's about it, folks. That's it for this short stories episode. Get in touch, let me know what you thought. I know you will. until the weekend. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Join the Facebook group. Get in touch. Let me know what you think. And if your house has a ballroom, go and dance in it. Please don't put dead bodies in it. Okay? Goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face, let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over. Let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over.